So now we've made a total of 5 bookings, 2 for the photo services, 1 for food, and 1 for makeup and professional decor. So now I'm going to go ahead back to the payment section. And you notice now if I select rows random, it's going to display the 3 vendors that I just booked. So you notice we have the photo, the professional, and the makeup services. So the template here will automatically list all vendors associated with the event you select. If I change this back to John, it's going to list the 2 vendors associated with the John's event. Now I can go ahead and select the John, and the template will automatically tell me how much I owe John for this event. Recall that we owe John a total of $250. However, that $250 is split across 2 events. So since I want to pay John for this event, the template is going to tell me only the total I owe John for this event, which is $100. If I change this to the second event, rows random, just for demonstration purposes, and here I select John, you notice it's going to tell me $150. So the template will automatically tell you the total amount you owe a particular vendor for a particular service. So in the vendor section, you know the total amount you owe the vendor, which is $250 for photo. Now this $250 is split across 2 events. $150 for the first event, which we saw here. So $150 for the event for rows random, and $100 for the other events. So we owe John Photo Services a total of $250. However, when you're making payments, you make payments for a particular event. So here you simply select the event ID in the payment section. The template will list all the vendors associated with that event. Next, you select the vendor you want to pay, and the template will tell you the total amount you owe this vendor for this event, which is $100. So now I'm going to go ahead and enter $50,000 as what I'm paying the vendor today. So on the 1st of September, I paid this vendor $50,000. Now if I click the Add New button to add another payment, I'm going to enter the same day, which is the 1st of September. If I select rows random, and I select John, you notice we're still owing $150 because we haven't made any payments for this event. However, if I change this to John Random and I select John Photo Services, the balance now is just $50,000 because the template recognizes that for this event, we've already paid part payment of $50,000. So that's how dynamic the template is. However, this time around, I'm going to change this to food vendor. And it tells me I'm owing food vendor $200, so I'm going to pay $100. So for the John Random's events, I booked 2 vendors. That's Photo John and Food Abuja, and I've paid both vendors 50%. So that means if I go to my vendor section, what I'm owing them should have reduced. So going to vendors, you notice what I owe John is now $200, reducing from $250. And what I owe Food is now $100, reducing from $200 because I've paid 50% from the entire order. So that's how the payment section works. You simply click the Add New button. You indicate the day you're paying the vendor first. Next, you select the vendor. That's the events that you're paying for. So if I select rows random, the template will list all the vendors associated with that event. Next, I indicate the vendor I want to pay, for instance, professional decor. It tells me the total I'm owing this professional. I go ahead and enter the amount I want to pay from that. And that's all. So now I've successfully entered another payment. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 other payments. So that way I've paid all of my vendors. So I'm going to make this the 23rd of July, 2017. And this is going to be the rows random service. I'm going to pay photo services. I'm equally going to pay 50% from what I owe. So that will be $75,000. And the last vendor I need to pay now is the makeup services. So the same day, I'm going to select rows random, and under vendor name, I'm going to indicate the vendor I want to pay, which is makeup services. The template tells me I'm owing a total of $230 or $130 rather, and I'm going to pay 50% from $130, which should be $65,000. So that's how easy it is to add payments. And as you add payments, if you go to the vendor section, you notice that the total reduces. So now I owe only $65,000 for makeup services, only $100 for decor, and so on. So that's how you make payments to your vendors. So now I've covered the customer section, which is where you add new customers using the Add New button. The Add Income is used to add income when received from a customer. So you simply click the Add New button, you select the customer and the amounts that you're paying. To delete income, you simply click on the first cell, click on Delete, and that income is deleted. So that's the customer section. Next, we cover the event section. This is where you add new events by clicking the New Events button. In the upper part, you supply all the events details, and in the bottom part, you can assign vendors to the events. So there are two ways in which you can assign vendors, either using the bottom section here, or you make use of the Book Vendor section. To delete an event, you simply click on the customer's name. For instance, notice I've clicked on John Random, click on Delete, and the template is going to ask, are you sure you want to delete this event, which is a wedding party? If you do, you click on Yes. If you don't, you click on No. To book a vendor, you simply go to the Book Vendor section. You click the Add New button and you supply details. First, you indicate the day you're calling the vendor to book their services. Next, you select the event ID that you're booking for. Then, the vendor you're booking their service, the amounts the vendor is charging you, and a brief description of what you expect the vendor to perform. To delete any booking, you simply click on the first cell, click on Delete, and click on Yes. To add payments for a vendor, we've covered that by using the Add Payments button. Simply click Add New. You indicate the day you're paying the vendor. Next, you select the event you're paying for. Once you select the event, the template will automatically list all the associated vendors on the right. You then select the vendor. The template will tell you the total amount you're owing the vendor, and then you can go ahead and enter the amount you're about to pay. To delete any expense, you simply click on the first cell, click on Delete, click on Yes, and that entry is deleted. Next, we go to the vendor section. This is where you add vendors. You make use of the Add New button to add a new vendor. It inserts a blank new row. You enter the vendor's name. Using your tab key to move to the next field, you enter the phone number, the email, and product and services rendered. The template will automatically at any point in time tell you the overall total you're owing that vendor. To delete a vendor, you simply click on the first field, click on Delete, click on Yes. Next, we go to the Get Information section. Now, the Get Info section is used to quickly extract contact information and debtor information. At the top, you have the option of selecting either the customer, a vendor, or a venue. Now, once you click on Customer, the next field here will automatically list all the customers in your database. So notice we have 2 customers listed. Now, once you select the customer, the template will automatically display their phone number, their email address, and other contact information. So this is a quick way, as the name says, to get information for a particular customer, venue, or vendor. So you notice it tells you the phone number. You can quickly place a call, send an email, and you can know the total amount you're owing that customer. In the same way, if I select John Random, you notice instantaneously the values here are replaced, and now it's going to show me data for John Random. So John's phone, John's email, residential address, the duration I've known John for, and what I'm owing, or what John Random is owing me. So that's a summary. If you have 10 customers listed in your customer section, the 10 customers are equally going to be listed in the drop-down list here. So you can quickly extract customer information. In the same way, you can extract vendor information. You simply click on vendor here. This drop-down list here would automatically update and now display vendors in your database. So this is a dynamic drop-down list. The values that are displayed here are subject to your selection here. So if you select customer here, it's going to display all customers in your database in this drop-down list. However, if you go ahead and select vendor, it's going to display all vendors from your vendor section. So notice these are the 4 vendors, and the moment you select a vendor, it will also display their contact information and give you brief details about how much you're owing that vendor. So this is a quick way to extract info. So if you quickly want to know how much am I owing my makeup services, you just click on makeup services. It tells you in the extreme right the total amount you're owing makeup services, and also your phone number if you want to place a call. And this works for all of the vendors in your database. In the same way, you can quickly get venue information. Now, to get venue information, you simply click on venue here, and this will display all venues in your database. However, we haven't covered the venue section. It's in the reports section, so that's why there are no venues. But later on, when I cover the reports section, we add venues to our database. I'll come back here and show you how that section works. So the moment you select the venue, it's going to tell you contact information of the venue and the amounts they charge at that venue. So that's what the upper section does. It enables you quickly extract customer, vendor, or venue information. Now the bottom section enables you find venues and also get your debtors list. Now debtors are people that owe you money. So all the customers that owe you money, you simply click on debtors, click on refresh, and it's going to list all the customers that owe you money. So if 20 customers owe you money, it's going to list the 20 customers here. So notice it tells us that 2 customers owe us money, and this is the total amounts they both owe us. And at the bottom, it breaks it down, telling us the individual customer, the amounts they owe, and their phone number so you can call and follow up so they can make payments. Now this is dynamic. So notice it tells us Rose Random is owing us 500,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add income from Rose Random so I can clear this outstanding. So let's assume Rose Random pays me the balance of 500,000. So I simply go to my add income in the customer section, click on add new, insert the day I'm receiving the money. So let's assume on the 24th of July 2017, Rose Random pays the balance, tells us the balance is 500. So Rose Random clears that 500,000. So now Rose Random owes us nothing. Going to the customer section, you notice it shows 0 outstanding for Rose Random. So the red is gone. If I go to my Get Info section and I refresh the report, you notice now it should tell us we have only one debtor, which is John Random. So you notice it automatically recognizes that, telling us this is the only customer now that owes us money. This is their phone number. This is the amount they owe. So that's how the template is dynamic. Once you add payments, it's going to automatically remove that customer from the debtors list. So that's the summary of the Get Info section. How to find venues. I'm going to cover this later on when I'm covering the venue functionality. Next, we move to the expense section. Now, the expense section, we've covered part of this. We covered adding vendor payments. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to add business expenses. So for instance, your rent, your utility, transportation, and all of that. So entering business expenses is quite similar to entering vendor payments. Recall that when entering vendor payments, the first step is to go to the expense section by clicking on expenses on the navigation pane. Once you're in the expense section, you then click the add new button. This inserts a blank new row. You enter the payment dates as the day you're paying the vendor. You move to the next field. You select the associated event ID. You skip the next column, so the expense category column is skipped, and you move on to select the vendor's name, and lastly to enter the amount paid. So these are the fields that you supply values to. Now, when you're entering other business expenses like your rent, your utility, transportation, it's a similar process. So you equally come to the expense section, you equally click the add new button, you enter the expense date. The only difference is you leave the event ID field blank, so you don't enter any value here. You skip this column and you move ahead and you select the expense category. Now, the expense category column holds a drop-down list, and this has some defined options. So for instance, rent, salaries, utility, advertising, phone bill, and so on. You equally have the ability to add 3 additional expense categories to better suit your business. So later on, I'm going to demonstrate how you can add that. So once you select the expense category, for instance, rent, you move on to the next field, and here you supply the expense name. So if this is rent, you can go ahead and write July 2017 office rent. So here pretty much you supply additional details pertaining to the category you selected. Then lastly, you enter the amounts that you're paying for your July 2017 rent. And that's all. So that's how you enter a business expense. So you notice it's quite similar to vendor payments. The only difference is you leave the event ID column blank, and you go ahead and select an expense category. Now, to better understand how to use this section, particularly with regards to the expense categories, I'm going to go ahead to one of our reports, which is in the report section, to better explain this functionality. So I'm going to delete this row. I'm going to click on the reports label on the navigation pane. And the report I'm going to go through is the profit and loss statement. Now, the profit and loss statement is a financial report that pretty much summarizes your revenue, your cost, your expenses for a specific period. Now, that period can be a month, it can be a quarter, it can be annually, but it pretty much summarizes that data for you. So you know the total amount you earned from income in a month, the total amount you spent in a month or in a quarter or in a year. Now, the template, as a standard event planning template, generates this for you automatically. So this is the profit and loss, that's the P&L statement. It equally supports 3 types. So it supports generating this on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and on an annual basis. Now, to use this section, the first step is in the upper right-hand corner, you enter the year you want to generate this report for. Now, since this template is multi-year, you need to tell, are you generating the reports for 2017, 18, 19, and so on. So you can change this to 18, 19, and any year you want to generate the report for. But I'm going to enter 2017 because recall that all the data I've been entering to this template from the start of the video pertain to 2017. So next, once you've entered the year that you're generating the report for, the next step is you tell the template what type of reports do you want to generate. Is it a monthly report? If you select monthly, it's going to generate a report for the current month, which is March, and the year you specified, which is 2017. So notice it says for month ended 31st March 2017. So this report now, if you refresh it, we tell you the total you've generated income for March 2017, that's from the 1st of March to the 31st of March. The same for other categories. If you selected quarter, the template is going to list the 4 quarters. So in a year, we have 4 quarters. The first quarter, which is from January to March. The second quarter, which is from April to June. The third quarter, which is from July to September. And the fourth quarter, which is from October to December. So it's going to generate the 4 quarters, telling you for quarter 1 to 4, 2017. And it's going to list the total you generated for the 4 quarters. And this is very useful because now you can do quarter-to-quarter comparison. So you can compare your performance in the first quarter with the second quarter, the third, and so on. And the last report is the annual. So notice once I click on annual, it's going to automatically list the 12 calendar months. So from January, February, March, up until December. And this way you can do month-to-month comparison. So you can see the total you earned in January versus February versus March versus April, and so on. So you can see if you're progressing as a business or if you're retrogressing. So these are the 3 types of reports that the template supports, the 3 types of P&L statements. Now, next I'm going to go through the categories. So we have 3 categories in the P&L statement. The first category is the income category. Now this is self-explanatory. This just aggregates or sums up the total income you generate for the time specified. So here it's going to show for January, for February, for March. So the total income you generated in January 2017, February 2017, March 2017, and so on. Now, it's assumed you have only one income source. So the only source of income is from event planning, and that's why only event planning is listed here. So the template will automatically sum up. Let me quickly go back to the dashboard and the events. So to sum up the total amount you generated using your event section for any particular month. So notice here we generated in the month of July 2017, 1 million, and in the month of September, 2 million. That's all we've earned this year. So if I go back to my reports, that's the profit and loss statement. If I refresh this report, the template will automatically aggregate data for all the sections. And you notice that for the income, that's the events planning income. January, everything is blank, but July, we have 1 million. September, we have 2 million. So the template will automatically extract that data from the event section. Now, one thing that is important to note is this template works on the accrual basis of accounting. What that means is it's going to tell you the total amount you earned, not necessarily the total cash you received. So what that means is this. Recall that in the event section, in July, we earned 1 million. In September, we earned 2 million. However, we might not collect this cash necessarily in these months. So it's possible that John Random will pay me this money finally in December 2017. But since I earned this money in September, it's going to count as income received in September. So that's the accrual basis of accounting. It tells you what you earned as at when you earn it, not as at when the cash is received. So for instance, it tells us we've earned 2 million in September, even though John Random is still owing us 1 million. So he hasn't paid it all off. But we know we're going to get the money eventually. So we've earned the money because we've offered the service, okay? So it's income earned, not cash received. So that's the P&L statement. So that's why it tells us in July, we earned 1 million. So we've offered services worth of 1 million. And in September, we offered services worth 2 million. So that's the first section of the P&L statements. That's the income section. So it tells you your source of income and the total, which is the same at the bottom. This way you can now do month-to-month comparison. Now the next section is the cost of revenue section. Now the cost of revenue basically tells you the cost associated with the services you render. So pretty much it tells you the total cost directly involved in the services that you've rendered. So for instance, in July 2017, we offered a service as we covered a birthday party and we charged the client 1 million naira. However, to successfully carry out this event, we incurred some costs. So for instance, we paid some vendors. It's possible that we spent money on transportation to the venue and back. So there are other costs that we associated with this event. So this section is going to sum that all up together. So it's going to sum up the total cost that's directly involved in offering the service. So things like, for example, the labor cost, as I said, vendor payments, things like, material cost, if you had to rent a cooling van, if you had to hire chairs, any other cost that you incurred to successfully carry out the service. And it's going to tell you the total of that. So the first row will tell you the total amount you paid for vendors. So notice in the month of July, we paid vendors, or we hired vendors worth 480,000. So from this 1 million, it means that this portion of cash did not actually enter our pocket. This was cost. So this is going to be given to the vendors. And then other costs are things like transportation, if you hire, as I said, a cooling van, any other cost that is associated to the revenue. That's why it's called cost of revenue, the cost you incurred in generating this revenue. Now, the advantage of this section is, without this section, if you just look at this report, in the month of July, it looks like you've made a whole whopping 1 million naira, which is a lot of money. However, it doesn't factor in the cost that you had to spend or you had to incur to deliver this service. So technically, the gross profits, which is just the difference between the two, that's the total income minus the cost of revenue, this is really your true profit, because this is truly the amount you earned, because 480,000 from this amount you used to pay vendors. So it's good to get a picture, that's a breakdown of that cash, so that you're not confused thinking you made 1 million. However, almost half of that amount did not actually enter your pocket, pretty much transferred from you to the vendors. So the cost of revenue is the costs that are directly related to the services you render. So in accounting, we have what we call direct and indirect costs. So direct costs, as I said earlier on, these are costs that are directly related to offering the service. So things like vendor payments, transportation to the venue and back, if you rent equipment for the service, that's all captured in vendor payments. Now, the gross profit is your actual profit. This is basically what you make after removing the cost associated with delivering the service. So once you remove this cost from this amount, this is the profit that you've made. So that's the first two sections. The income, that's what you charge the clients. The cost of revenue, what you spend in successfully carrying out this service. And the gross profit is the actual profits after you've removed the cost. So this is your direct cost. Now, the last section is the expenses, and this is what we call in accounting indirect cost. Now, expenses, these are costs that you're going to spend regardless of whether you get a job or not. So regardless of if, for instance, this client, Rose Random, called me for this birthday party, I'm going to pay my office rent. I'm going to pay myself salary. I'm going to buy, utilities, things like PHCN units for my office, fuel or diesel for my generator. I'm going to advertise on Facebook, social media. I'm going to buy phone for my credit. So indirect costs are costs that are not directly linked to the service you render. Pretty much your cost that you're going to spend, whether or not you get services or not that month. Okay? So to be able to differentiate between direct and indirect costs, you just need to ask yourself the question, will I spend this amount? You need to ask yourself this question. Would I incur this expense if I did not make a sale today? So if Rose Random did not call me to book this birthday party in July, will I still spend this money? If the answer is yes, that means it's an indirect cost. If the answer is no, that means it's a direct cost. So ask yourself, am I still going to pay the photographer money if Rose Random did not hire me for this birthday? The answer is no. So that is a direct cost. However, am I still going to pay myself salary this month even if I don't get this birthday party? The answer is yes. So that is an indirect cost. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Direct costs are costs that are directly associated with the services you render. So pretty much, because I got this job, I needed to hire vendors. Because I got this job, I needed to rent this cooling van. Those are direct costs. Indirect costs are expenses that you incur on a monthly basis, regardless of whether you get this job or not. So even if you don't make this sale, you're going to pay your office rents. You're going to, advertise on Facebook. You're going to recharge your phone to make calls. So these are pretty much the indirect costs. Okay, they're all listed here. And if you notice, the indirect costs are exactly what we saw in the expense category column. So the rents, salaries, utilities, advertising, and so on. And if we go back to that section, expenses, recall that all the values here, these are your indirect costs. So things like your rents, your salary. So anytime you fill in this column, just know that is your indirect cost. They're costs that are not directly associated with an event. And that's why I said that the event ID column will be blank, because indirect costs are not related with any event specifically. They're just general costs that you incur whether or not you get an order or not. Okay? So recall that that's why when you're adding vendor payments, you need to indicate the event ID, because vendor payments are directly related to an event, and so they're direct costs. However, things like rent, they're indirect costs because you're going to pay your office rent regardless of whether you get a job this month or not. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. So I wanted to explain that so you can better understand why you either enter an event ID or you don't. So either this column is blank, either this column is filled and this column is blank, or this column is filled and this column is blank. So the two cannot both be filled. And functionalities have been added such that if you attempt to fill the two, so for instance, if you enter there and then you still go ahead here and you want to enter a category, the template is going to tell you, Events category should be blank if expense is associated with an event, because the two cannot work together. If this is an expense that is directly linked with an event, it is a direct cost. However, if it is not, it is an indirect cost, so you cannot put the two together. So event category should be blank if expense is associated with an event, and it's going to go ahead and delete that category. So the two cannot work together. It's either or. Okay, so that's why I wanted to explain what that report does. And recall I said you had the ability to add 3 additional categories. Well, to do that, in the profit and loss statement, all you need to do is to simply fill up, let's go to the bottom, you simply fill up these rows here. So for instance, if here I go and type, hello, and I type hi, just random, data just for demonstration purposes. Now, these are not categories, please. This is just random. If I go back to my dashboard and I go back to that section, you'll notice that now we have the option to select LO and high. So LO and high have been filled there. So these 3 options can be populated from the profit and loss statement. Now you can put other expenses. For instance, if you have other costs on a monthly basis, if you want to track maybe the fuel you buy for your car, for instance, transportation is very important. I don't think I added transportation here. So transportation is a valid expense. You can know the total amount of fuel you buy in your car or you use on, taxis and all of that. So transportation is a valid expense. You can go ahead and put other expense categories. So just things you spend frequently. It's good to just have categories so that you can know at the end of the month, what is the total amount I spent on recharge card? What is the total amount I spent on advertising on social media? It's good to have expense categories. So I'm just going to go back to my profit and loss statement and delete the LO and high as that's not relevant. I'm going to replace it with something that's relevant. For instance, transportation, and this can also be, auto. So this covers transportation in terms of taxis and all. And also if I'm doing, buying fuel to my car, if I'm repairing my car, a mechanic and all of that. And you can add other categories, pretty much depending on your business. So that's this column here. So these are your indirect costs. And the template will tell you on a monthly basis the total amount you spent on rents, on salaries, and so on. And this way you can compare. So you can be able to know in January, did I spend more on recharge card than I did in February? Am I spending too much on recharge card? Am I spending too much on transportation and taxis? Do I need to limit that? So you can be able to compare across the calendar months. Okay, so that's pretty much a summary of the profit and loss statement. So we have 3 sections. The income section, which is income you earned. You can see this on a monthly basis or you can see this on a quarterly basis. So if you just want to see quarterly reports, you simply select quarter, click on refresh, and it's going to show you the quarterly amount. So in the 3rd quarter, we made 3 million, which is the sum of the 1 and the 2 from the 2 events we carried out. Okay, so this is a quarterly report. Now, as I said earlier on, it's advisable you print out this report either on a monthly, quarterly, on a yearly basis. It has been set to print out well, so print it out. Have a file whereby you file it. It's always good to have physical documentation, particularly for your reports. So that's a summary. Okay, so the income, what comes in, the cost of revenue, that's the cost directly related to the services you render. Then we have expenses, which are indirect costs, like your rent, utilities, transport, and so on. And at the extreme bottom, the template will calculate the net income. Now, the net income is just the difference. It subtracts the 2. So your gross profit minus all of your indirect costs to tell you your real profit. So that's the total amount you earned that month or that quarter. Okay, so that's a summary of this. I'm still going to come back to this report later on, but I just wanted to explain that so that when we're entering our expenses, we can understand why you cannot enter both an event ID and an expense category. So now I'm going to demonstrate how you add expense categories. Business expenses. So you click the Add New button and insert a blank new row. You enter the expense date. I'm going to make this July. Remember, you leave this blank. You go ahead and select the expense category. I'm going to select rent. You move to the next field and you supply the expense name. So this is going to be my July 2017 rent. And then lastly, you enter the amount you're paying for rent. Let's assume I pay $50,000 every month as my rent. So now I've successfully entered the business expense. To add another, you simply click the Add New button and you repeat the process. You enter the day you're making that expense. Now this can be any day in, it doesn't have to be the 23rd. I'm just lazy to type. That's why I'm using the same date, but it can be any date as at when they occur. Next, let's assume that I buy a recharge card for my phone. Next, usually I recommend so this can just be, empty. And I usually like writing the phone number so I can be able to track which line I spend more on, so you can write the phone or any other detail you want to write there, and then lastly, the amount you spend. So let's assume I bought card of, 5,000. To add another expense, you repeat the process. You click the Add New button. You enter the date, the category. Now another useful category can be internet subscription actually. So this can either be under utilities, or you can add another category as internet subscription. So you can be able to know what you spend on internet every month. So I'm just going to go to transportation, move to the next field. I'm just going to write, taxi to, say, to, from, I can type from home. You can be more descriptive here. So if this is, a place, you can go ahead and enter the place. I'm just giving random examples. And then you go ahead here and enter the tax, the amount. So let's assume that I spent, I don't know, 10,000 on taxi to and back, so pretty much you just list anytime money leaves your account, you need to come to this section and document it. Okay, so you can track your cash. And these are business expenses. So please let your business and personal expenses be distinct. This template is for business expenses. So, that's it. You just enter the day. Next, you select what you're spending on. So let's assume that this would be for advertising. Next, you indicate the expense name. So for instance, this can be, Facebook campaign. You can exactly say what it is for one of your products, maybe your wedding campaign. Then lastly, the amount you spent on the advertisement, maybe 20,000. So pretty much you just list all of your expenses here. And that's all. So for vendor payments, you enter the date, the event ID, the vendor name, and the amount you pay. For business expenses, you enter the date, the expense category, details of the expense, and then the amount you paid. And now that we've added some values, you notice if I go back to our profit and loss statements and I refresh the report, it's going to automatically populate the indirect costs section. So you notice now we have 50,000 for rent, We have 20,000 for advertising. We have 5,000 for phone bill, 10,000 for transport, and then the total is 85,000. So it's automatically summed that up. And this is the quarterly report. If I change this to the, annual reports, it's going to split that up. So all the expenses would be in the month of July. There we go. So that's July. If I scroll to the bottom, you notice in July, those are all the values, and that's the profits. That's the net income that I made in that month. Okay, so the template will automatically do that for you. So that's a summary of how you make use of the expense section. I think I've covered all the expenses. Now, the last expense I'm going to cover is, it's possible, here we've demonstrated adding vendor payments. There might be other costs associated with offering a service. For instance, taxis that you hire to go to the event venue. If you're renting equipment like canopies and chairs. So to add that, it's the same process. You just enter the dates. So I'm just going to make this 1 September. Next, you need to select the event ID. So for example, let's assume that for John Random's event, I'm going to rent 2 mobile toilets. So you notice immediately here, you just have to enter mobile toilets, 2. Then you enter the amount you're paying for the 2 mobile toilets. I don't know, 50,000. There we go. So now we've added another cost for this event. Okay, but we've associated with this event. So if we go to our reports now and we regenerate the profit and loss statements, the template is going to factor that under the cost of revenue. So you notice now for cost of revenue in the month of September, we paid 300,000 for vendors and then 50,000 for other costs. So the template has recognized that other costs associated with successfully covering this birthday party is 50,000. Okay, so that's how this section works. So you can add additional expenses. So equally the transportation, that's the taxi you use to the venue. If you hire other equipment, you document everything here. So the labor costs, which are vendor payments, and the material costs, like this example I just gave, everything is documented here. The only difference is you need to specify the event ID that's associated with that expense. So that's a summary of the expense section, the add need to add a new expense, the delete row to delete an existing expense. So we've covered the first 5 sections of the template. So now we go to the report section. Now the report section, we've already covered 1 report. So that the video is not so long, I don't think I'm going to cover this report again. I'm just going to go through the other 3 reports at the top, and then the bottom report, that's the event calendar. So the first report is very straightforward. This is the income report. Now this is cash received report, because recall that the profit and loss statement tells you what you earned. So the fact that you earned 2 million in September doesn't mean that 2 million naira entered your account. It's possible the client is still owing you money. So the P&L statement works on the accrual basis. It tells you what you earned, not the cash you received. Now, as business people, we also want to know the cash we received, and that's where the income report comes in. So the income report pretty much tells you the cash that entered your account. So it works with your payment section. So notice it says cash. So this will just tell you the actual physical cash you received on a monthly basis. So it's going to tell you the month, the person you received it from, and the total amount you received. Now, I don't really have ample data in my database. What will happen is I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to add transactions for the first 3 or 4 calendar months so that we have, more data in our reports so that we can better appreciate the reports. Because right now we have data only for July and only for September. So I'm going to pause the video and add additional data. Now I've added additional data to the template. For instance, if you go to the customer section, you notice that I've added income across the first 3 calendar months. That's January to March, all in 2017. So all my transactions are for the year 2017. If we go to the vendor section, you notice the same. I've added payments. Now the payments across vendor, so I've added vendor payments, that's direct costs. I've equally added business payments, that's indirect costs, across the calendar months. Also, all in the year 2017, January to December. Now, if we go to the reports, the first report is the income report. And as I said earlier, this is a cash report. So it's going to show you the cash received on a monthly basis. So clicking on the report opens it up. And this is a very useful report because cash is crucial to any organization. You need to know the amount of physical cash that comes in and physical cash that goes out. So at the top, you simply select the year you want to generate the report for. Now, since all our data is 2017, that's why only 2017 is displayed. Later on, when you have data across multiple years in these sections, it's going to all display it here. So I'm going to click on 2017, click on OK. And at the bottom, it's going to show me the total cash received on a monthly basis. So in January, I know I received a total cash of 600, and this is who I received it from. In February, I received 450. This is who I received it for. In March, a total of 1.4 across these 2 customers, and so on. So it's going to list it in chronological order from January to December. And at the bottom, I'm going to see the grand total for the entire year of 2017. Now, later on, you're going to have multiple transactions. So rather than scrolling down, there's a filter at the top whereby you can see for a specific month. So if I want to see for January 2017, I simply click on January, and to list only all cash received in the month of January. It's going to tell me the customer I received it from and the respective amounts. I can see the same for February, for March, for July, and for September. Now, if you have data across the 12 calendar months, they're all going to be listed here. But right now, these are the only months I have data for. That's why these are the only options I have. Now, just like you can see for an individual month, you can see for multiple months. So if I want to see for the first quarter, that's January, February, March, I simply click on January. Then I leave my hand on the control key on my keyboard and I click on February, March. And so it's going to show me data for January, for February, for March, and the grand total for the first quarter. So I know that for the first quarter of 2017, this is the cash that entered my account. Now, to clear the filter, if you want to see for all the calendar months, you simply click on the funnel in the upper right-hand corner. You notice as I hover my mouse, it says clear filter. So once you click on it, it's going to clear the filter and display for all the 12 calendar months again. So this is the first report, which is the income received cash. Now the next report is exactly the same, just for expenses. So this will show you your expenses on a monthly basis. So cash that left your accounts. Now this is going to combine both your direct costs, that's cost related to vendor payments, material cost for a particular event, and also business expenses like your rent. So your expenses shows your direct and your indirect cost. Basically all the cash that left your account, the summary is going to be displayed here. At the top, you simply select the year. So for instance, if I want to see for 2017, and below it's going to show me the total I spent on a monthly basis. So in January, I know I spent a total of 100,000. 40,000 for this vendor. I paid my rent for 50,000, and transport to a venue and from, I paid 10,000. The month of February, I paid these 2 vendors. These are the respective amounts I paid. I paid my rent and I rented 2 canopies for this amount. So the cash that left my account in the month of February is 140,000. So I can see this for all the calendar months. You notice we made a lot of transactions in July. We spent a whopping over 300,000. We paid some vendors. We paid our rent. We bought recharge card, transportation, and we did a bit of advertising. So it's going to list the breakdown, the individual amounts you spent, and the overall total. And we see this for the 12 calendar months and the grand total across the entire year 2017. Now at the top, we have the ability to see for a particular month also. So if I want to see for only January, I simply click on January, and here's my January report. Here's my February report, my March report, and so on. And as I said earlier on, it's very important to print this out on a monthly basis. So just print it, or a quarterly basis, depending on how many transactions you tend to have. If you're a company that has frequent transactions, then print it on a monthly basis. If you don't have so frequent, you can print on a quarterly basis. And you can just print this out, have a file it in, or you can save this as a PDF and have a folder on your computer where you save all your reports. Now to see for all, you simply clear the filter. So that's the second report. So we've seen our coming in, cash inflow, and cash outflow. Next, we have the event summary. Now this is very useful as this enables you to see the summary for a particular event. Recall that in the event section, we have all our events listed. Now these are all the events that we've had in the year 2017. Now for each of these events, we booked vendors. So in the book vendor section, we can see a breakdown of all the vendors we booked. But the more transactions or the more events you have, the more clustered this section is going to be. So you notice this is just really clustered. It's hard for you to identify which vendors for which events and all of that. So this report makes it easier for you. So once you click on this report, you can be able to see only vendors associated with a particular event. So it's more like an event summary. So to kickstart this section, at the top here, you simply select the event ID you want to see a summary for. And this is going to list all the event IDs in your database. And when you select an event ID, you simply click on the refresh button, and the template will automatically extract the event summary, telling you the customer associated with this event, the dates that this event took place, the amount you charged the customer, and the estimated number of guests. And at the bottom, it's going to list all the vendors. That's not only vendors, it's going to pretty much list all the costs. That's the direct cost associated with this event. So the vendors you paid, equally the materials you purchased or you rented, all are going to be listed here. So for this event, we hired only 3 vendors. This is the job we expected them to perform, the amounts they charged us, the amounts we've paid, and what we're owing them. So this is a quick snapshot. So with this, you can be able to know that, okay, the total amount that I'm owing all vendors to close this event is $240,000. The entire vendors I hired is $480,000. I've paid half of it, and I'm still owing the balance. And this is dynamic. You notice right now it says that we're still owing photo services for the event on the 25th of July, $75,000. So if I go back to my vendor section and I quickly add a payment just for demonstration purposes, so I click on Add New, and I'm going to make this the 26th of July. So I'm just using dates that correspond with the transaction so that the data makes sense. So next I'm going to select the transaction, which is July 25th. And here I'm going to select the vendor, which is photo, which I'm owing $75,000. So I'm going to clear the entire $75,000. There we go. So I've cleared that amount. So I shouldn't be owing John Photo Services again for this particular event. So if I go back to my reports and I go to my event summary, all I need to do is to refresh the report so that data can be repulled. And you notice now it says a balance of 0. So the template automatically recognizes that payment. So $150 was charged, $150 has been paid, I am owing nothing. And so now at the bottom, the total I'm owing all my vendors is reduced to $165,000. So this is a snapshot of this event. So later on, whenever you close off any event, or when you've paid all your outstandings, it's always advisable to also print this out or save as a PDF. So there's a button here that enables you to create a PDF of this. So you can have a folder on your computer where you have a PDF file of all of the events you've ever covered. So you know at any point in time the events, the customer, and a summary of all the vendors you used. You can select another event, September 1st, 2017, John Random, click refresh. It's going to tell you the customer, which is John Random, the date of the event, the total amount you charged the customer, and the estimated number of guests. At the bottom, it tells you that you hired 2 vendors, so the labor cost is it's 300, 100 for the first vendor, 200 for the second vendor, and the material cost, you have to rent mobile toilets of $50,000. So it's going to add together the direct cost, both labor and material. And at the bottom, you know, this is the total amount. That's the total cost associated with rendering the service, the total you've paid so far, the total you're still expected to pay. So that's a snapshot of this event. And you can see this for all events. I don't want to take so much of your time. I'm just going to click on 2 other events and just show you how dynamic that is. So here's this event. So this is the event details. And here, these are the only 2 vendors we hired. This is the amount they charge and so on. And now the last example I'm going to use, that's February 9th event, 2017. The same thing. So we only had 1 material expense for this event. So it's just going to tell you the summary of everything. And to create a PDF, you simply click on the Create PDF button. Now, once you click on this button, it's going to pop up 2 dialog boxes. The first is going to ask you for the location on your computer where you want to save this file. And that's why it's advisable for you to have a folder where you save all of your event summaries. So just open up a folder for all event summaries, open up a folder for all reports, your income report, your expense report, and a folder for all of your profit and loss statements. So just have multiple folders on your computer. So once you click on this, it's going to ask you for where you want to save this. So you locate that folder, you click there. Next, it's going to ask you for the name you want to save the file as. So let me just demonstrate that. So once you click, it takes a while to load. Then it opens up a dialog box with your file system on your computer, and it asks you for the folder name. So where is the folder you want to save this PDF? So I'm just going to click on my desktop, but I do not advise you to do this. Do not save it on your desktop. Have a folder. So when you identify the folder, you click on it, then you click on OK. Next is going to ask you for the name. What should it save this file as? Okay, so it's going to ask you for the file name. So here you simply type the file name. So I'm just going to type events summary, then the customer name. I think this is John Random. If this is not John Random, this is just a demonstration. And then the event date. So usually I just enter the months and then the year. Now, I can't really remember the month and the year for this event. I'm just entering random data. I hope I'm correct. Okay, I'm correct. It's actually John Random. There we go. So it's going to create the PDF of this event summary. And once the process is complete, it's going to open it up. So it's going to open it up using your default PDF opener. Mine is Acrobat, so it's going to open up with Adobe Acrobat. But if you don't have one, it's going to open it up on Google Chrome or any browser, your default browser. So here is the event summary. So at the top, now this is zoomed out. I can just zoom in a bit so we can see better. There we go. So event summary, the event ID, details of the customer, the dates and the amount you charged, and then the vendor details. So at the bottom, we have the grand totals. So the total amounts that all our vendors charged us, the total we've paid, and the outstanding. So once you've closed off an order like this, so zero balance, you can then just, save this or print it out. So that's how that functionality works. It will create a PDF of this data. Okay, so that's the event summary. You simply at the top, select the event ID, click the refresh button. The template will display the data at the bottom, extracting information from the event section, the vendor section, and your expenses section. So now going back to the events, so we've covered the first three reports. That's the income, the expense, and the event summary. Next, the venue list. This is actually not a report. This functionality is covered in the basic spreadsheet, so I'm not going to cover it. This is just where you document all your events. It's advisable to have a database where you store all of your venues. Sorry, venues, not events. Where you store all of your venues. So you just throw the venue name, click the add new button, you supply details of the venue name, the location, the contact details, and all of that. And the template would, in the get info section, you can now be able to quickly get details pertaining to that event when you use the find venue functionality. So the basic spreadsheet video covers it. The link should be somewhere on the screen, so you can click on the link to watch that video later on. And the events calendar. Now the events calendar is very useful. It enables you to see a monthly calendar of all of your events. This is a calendar, so it's designed in a calendar format. We have the days of the week here. So to kickstart this template, all you need to do is to enter the year. So I'm going to use 2017 since all my data is 2017. You select the months, for instance, February, and the template is going to tell you the total number of events you have in the month of February 2017. So we have only one event, so it's going to tell us one event, and this is the event. John Random, this is his phone number, this is the event. So this is just the calendar. So this way you can easily open up this calendar and know the days you're booked, the days you're not booked. If I change this to March, for instance, it's going to tell us in the month of March we have 2 events. So we have one on the 13th. We have 2 events actually on the 13th. So on the same day, we have 2 events. Now the calendar is going to show you only the first event. If you want to see the 2 events, on the right-hand side here, you simply enter the date. So this is the 13th of March 2017. So here you simply enter 13, the day, March, the month, 2017. So that's the date of / the month of / the year. Once you click on enter, it's going to display all the events you have on that day. So these are the 2 events we have on the 13th of March. The Rose Random event that is displayed here, which is a business development seminar, and then John Random's Easter church party. If you scroll to the right, it's equally going to show their phone number if you want to place a call to them. Okay, so the calendar is going to tell you a summary of the events you have, the total number you have per day. Now, if you have multiple events per day, the calendar will show you only the first event that was booked. If you want to see the 2 events, you simply enter the date on the right-hand side, and the template is going to display the customers and the relevant events on that day. The same way, if I change this to January 2017, it's telling me in January I have only 1 event, which is on the 3rd of January. This is the event, this is the customer. And if I equally enter the dates here, so 03/01/2017, it's going to list that 1 event. So this right-hand side is actually very useful. If a customer calls you and wants to book an event for a day, you simply just need to type in the day here. And once you type in the day, it's going to tell you if you have an event. For instance, if I type 05/01/2017, there's no event on the 5th of January. So if I click enter, it's going to be blank. So you know this day you're free, you can book an event. Okay, and I'm going to equally select July here. So how many events do we have in the month of July? We have only one. If I scroll to the bottom, it's on the 25th of July, which is a birthday party by Rose. Now, I don't have so many events. Usually your calendar will be more populated, so you probably have boxes everywhere with events, but I have only one. And here, if I go ahead and enter 25/07/2017, it's going to list the single event I have, which is the Rose Random's birthday party. And I can see this for any calendar month across any year. Once you select the month, the template will automatically tell you the total number at the top. And on day, which is the first, which is a Friday, it's going to tell you there's a wedding party, and this is the event. Okay? And days, you have two events. For instance, in March, we have two events. It's going to equally tell you two events, but it's going to display only one. If you want to see the two events, you simply enter it here, which is the 13th of March 2017. The template is going to list the two customers, give you details of the events, and also your phone numbers if you want to place a call. So that's a summary of the events calendar, very useful report. And the last report we've already covered is the profit and loss statement. I'm just going to refresh this report now that we have a bit of data so you can see how it looks when you have ample data. Okay, so here's the report. You notice in January now, this is the total income we received. In February, we received only 300, so you can compare. You know, in January, you made almost twice as much as you did in February. In March, you made almost 3 times as much as you made in March. So that's the first quarter. The second quarter, nothing. So there were no customers, 0, 0, 0. So we need to do a bit more marketing there. The third quarter, we made 1 million in July and 2 million in September. So there's a huge growth from our first quarter to our second quarter. And our third quarter too, we haven't made anything. So October, November, December, 0, 0, 0. Okay? And then at the bottom, it's going to tell you for the cost of revenue. So that's the direct cost you spent to carry out this event worth 700,000. Okay? So it tells us that for this 700,000, we spent 90,000. That's the cost we incurred. 80 for vendors and 10 for other costs. So that means that our gross profit is 610, which is the difference between the two. The same we can see in February. So this is the total amount we charged the clients. This is what we spent to carry out the event. And this is the gross profit. The same here. This is what we charged. This is the direct cost that was involved in offering that service. And this is the gross profit. So you can see this across all the months. And at the bottom, we have our expenses. Okay, so we only spent on rent, which is not realistic. Obviously, you spend on other categories, and that's for the second month and so on. And at the bottom, you know your net profit, which is pretty much your income minus your expenses. Okay, so that's your net income. So you see that across the 12 calendar months. So now if I go to my print preview, you notice this fits on a page, so you can easily print this out. In the same way, you can save this as a PDF, as I said, and have a folder on your computer where you save this every month. The advantage of a PDF is that PDFs are not editable. So once you save it, you cannot alter the values. So that's why it's always advisable to either print it out or save it as a PDF that you cannot alter the values. This is the annual report. We can go to the quarter report. We can refresh. And the same way, we'll see for the first 3 quarters. So we see for, template is still loading. There we go. So now it's complete. So we can see for the first 4 quarters. You know, the template will automatically clear this section. That's how professional it is. So this is now looking neat. This can be printed out. So for the first quarter, this is what we made. Second, we made nothing. Third, we made this. We can compare that across quarters for all of the categories and for the net income at the bottom. And the last report, which is the monthly report. Now this is going to be blank because this is going to be for March 2017. Let's see, do we have data for March 2017? Once we click refresh, it's going to clear all the data here. Okay, we actually do have transactions in March. So this is just for the current months, which is March, we're in March, and the year we entered at the top, remember, we entered year 2017. If I change this to 2018, you notice everything is going to be blank because we haven't earned any income or incurred any expense for the year 2018. So if I refresh now, you notice this is saying March 2018 for month ended March, but everything is 0 because no transactions in March 2018. So that's how dynamic the template is. So that's a summary of the standard event planning template. You have the ability to have multiple customers, multiple events per customers, and multiple vendors per event. You can equally track customer payments and outstanding, vendor payments and outstanding. You can be able to see your monthly reports using your profit and loss statements and your cash reports, your income, cash going out, cash out inflow, and cash outflow.